May 23, 1994, the body of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis is brought to Arlington National Cemetery to lie beside her martyred husband. Their children, Carolyn and John, lead the Kennedy family in paying final tribute to a former First Lady who once carried a nation's grief on her shoulders.
Dedicated, determined, dependable. This is Channel 5 Eyewitness News at 5.
Good evening, I'm Brenda Wood.
And I'm Jim Axel. Former First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis has been laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery. It has been an emotional day for her family and for many around the world who watched today's funeral on live television. John Marler is joining us now with the full story. John?
Jim, it was a private service in a very public way. The spotlight Jackie Onassis had so carefully avoided shined brightly today, both in New York City for the memorial service and at Arlington National Cemetery. First, we start in New York. The day began on Fifth Avenue as her casket was taken from the apartment where she died last week, surrounded by family. The service was held in the church where she was baptized 64 years ago. Cameras were not allowed inside. Outside, the world watched as her children and First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton arrived. Inside the church, mourners heard from Senator Ted Kennedy.
She was a blessing to us and to the nation, and a lesson to the world on how to do things right, how to be a mother, how to appreciate history, how to be courageous.
From New York, the casket carrying her body was taken away for the flight to Washington, D.C. There, hundreds of people lined the motorcade route as a procession of 28 cars solemnly made the journey to Arlington National Cemetery. Only family and close friends were allowed near the burial site. The rest of us watched on television. President Clinton spoke for a nation as he delivered the brief eulogy.
We are joined here today at the site of the eternal flame lit by Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis 31 years ago to bid farewell to this remarkable woman whose life will forever glow in the lives of her fellow Americans.
Jackie Onassis is buried between the grave of her first husband and the couple's first child, an unnamed daughter stillborn in 1956. Today, son John Kennedy Jr. and daughter Caroline Kennedy Schlossberg knelt in silent prayer, this time in memory of their mother. And once again, a nation wept. And once again, we watched as, one by one, mourners passed by to remember a Kennedy, to remember a part of our lives which is forever etched in our memories. In the words of Senator Ted Kennedy, no one else looked like her, spoke like her, wrote like her, or was so original in the way she did things. No one we knew ever had a better sense of self. And for those of us who grew up in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, today was indeed, Jim, a touching day.
Yeah, I bet it was. Thank you, John. Today's funeral was restricted to Kennedy family members and a few close friends. The section of the 612-acre cemetery surrounding the Kennedy gravesite was closed to visitors. The Kennedy grave is the most visited shrine in the cemetery, attracting 4 million people every year. A cemetery spokesman said 23 other funerals that were scheduled for today went on as planned.
A young soldier from Rex, Georgia has been charged with the murder and rape of a toddler while stationed in Germany. News of the arrest and the terrible crime is just reaching Clayton County, where Patrick Smith grew up. Channel 5's Cynthia Good says his relatives and friends are stunned.
He is 22-year-old U.S. Army Specialist Patrick McDonald Smith, arrested last week after DNA testing of nearly 2,000 U.S. soldiers and family members stationed in Germany linked him to the murder, rape, sodomy, and kidnapping of a 2-year-old girl.
From the teachers who had him, from what I can gather, this is totally out of character, and just everybody's real shocked.
Having known the young man for 3 years, I just couldn't believe that he would be guilty. He could be capable of such a thing.
Smith spent 3 years in Colonel Feld's ROTC class while attending Morrow High, where he graduated in 1989. Smith was the well-liked operations officer on the ROTC command staff.
He was an outstanding young man, straight A student, excelled in everything, very popular.
And relatives say pretty much the same thing. Today I spoke with Smith's mother, Ruth, by telephone. Crying, she told me her son is innocent, that he's a good boy who has never gotten into trouble, and that he could not have committed this terrible crime. His parents didn't have much more to say on camera. Were you surprised to hear this news?
I'm not going to say anything.
He learned of his son's arrest from a local newspaper reporter. This is where young Patrick Smith grew up, playing basketball in a quiet Rex, Georgia neighborhood where his parents still fly the American flag. Okay. News of his arrest has stunned the neighbors.
Surprised.
Yeah. He seemed like a nice boy.
For what I knew of him, he was, yes.
Smith has been transferred to American custody, confined at the Army facility in Mannheim, Germany. But the Army still isn't talking about the case. Despite the DNA evidence, those who know Smith here are hoping for the best. Cynthia Good, Channel 5 Eyewitness News.
The Army finally contacted the Smith family this afternoon and notified them of their son's arrest. No word yet on when he'll go to court. And now this update, 6 boys charged in the rape of a 9-year-old girl from Griffin have been ordered held in the Regional Youth Development Center until trial next month. The judge at this morning's hearing also ruled that the 6 should be tried as juveniles. The boys have admitted to police that they took part in the attack. The girl who was assaulted and her family are receiving counseling. Tonight at 6 on Eyewitness News, how DNA evidence is being used in the DeKalb County rape trial. It's a story that's received national attention and is unfolding in court today.
Updating a grisly story that dates back to Mother's Day, police say they have caught a suspect in the murder of a woman in southeast Atlanta. The victim's daughter found the body of her mother stuffed in a closet on Mother's Day. Police say Angela Womble had been stabbed several times. Well, now homicide police have arrested Mike Alfred Griffin. They've charged him with the crime. They say Griffin was released from prison 8 months ago, where he'd been serving time for voluntary manslaughter. Governor Miller's anti-crime legislation hasn't even become law, but the State Board of Pardons and Paroles is already implementing some of its tougher sentencing guidelines for violent offenders. About 50 men and women have been moved out of halfway houses and back to prison, and scores more are expected to be told they will remain in prison longer than they expected. Channel 5's Paul Yates has more on this story.
The new stance by the Paroles Board comes as the state adds more prison space. Almost 4,000 inmate beds have become available in the last 6 months. The board says more inmates will see their parole cases reviewed and more will serve longer sentences.
We're going back and looking at them, in some cases tacking on another year, in many other cases telling those inmates that they're going to now serve their entire sentence instead of the benefit of parole. We're just going back. We have the prison beds to work with now. These people need to be serving a little bit longer, and we're making them do it.
But advocates and attorneys for prisoners argue that the state is now engaging in, quote, assembly line justice that sends the wrong message to inmates who follow the rules and are well behaved. Among those being returned to prison are women who say they killed abusive husbands. But the Paroles Board says it is acting against inmates who have committed violent crimes and have shown previous problems managing their lives on parole. The governor today supported the board's actions.
That's up to the parole board, and that's up to the jury and the judge that gave the original sentence. But my philosophy is I believe in long sentences.
The Paroles Board says that many current parole dates were set a few years ago at the peak of prison overcrowding. Now about 1,000 inmates have seen their parole date adjusted. Jim and Brenda, we are told that 1,000 more could see their cases reviewed before the end of the year.
All right, Paul Yates in the newsroom. Thank you, Paul.
Straight ahead on Eyewitness News at 5 today, some big changes are ahead for your favorite television station.
If you are a long-time, loyal CBS watcher on Channel 5, are you ever in for a shock? I'm Jim Kazurski. Stick around. I'll tell you about it.
Also ahead, where do you turn when conventional medicine doesn't work? We'll take a look at the options in our special report, Alternative Medicine.
And coming up later, you'll see how today's sophisticated computer games can turn any couch potato into a super athlete.
Tonight at 6 on Eyewitness News.
Signal 76, code 2.
It's a delay that could be deadly.
It was longer than 27 minutes.
It felt like an eternity.
Why are some Georgia emergency units taking far too long? Channel 5's Dale Russell and the I-Team uncover the truth about emergency medical services.
They're here to help us, but they can't help us get her to the hospital. She needed to be at the hospital.
Dangerous delay. Tonight at 6 on Eyewitness News. Dedicated, determined, dependable.